Welcome to the news for the week of 25 October 2020. IoT, Southern Comfort, not the drink. Winston privacy, not the cigarette. Backdoor wars, I'll tell you about that later. KashmirBlack, and healthcare keeps getting hit. All this, and Roger Hale from Big ID will be with us. Stick around.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Increased attacks, skill gaps, talent shortages, expanding attack surfaces. Cybersecurity and IT teams face these real issues every day. CyberArray for Teams is the #1 NIST-aligned DoD 8140 and 8570 compliant certification and skills training platform. CyberArray for Teams makes managing teams easier, guarantees measurable training outcomes, and keeps your team's skills sharp to meet today's biggest security threats. And did you know 96% of the Fortune 500 have employees training on CyberArray? CyberArray for Teams. Now you know. Visit cyberarray.it/solved to solve your team training challenges.
All right, and now the news. IoT. Well, it sure is fun to add devices to your world, right? I mean, I like to do that. Drones, cams, sex toys, you name it. If it's not Wi-Fi enabled, well, it's just not cool anymore. Well, Nokia's Threat Intelligence Lab released their 2020 report and generally claimed something that we all knew. You knew this, and I knew this, and I know you knew it, and you know that I knew that you knew, and we all knew what we knew when we knew it. But the number of attacks based on IoT is going to grow dramatically. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so I think we've all been saying that. But according to this report, with incredible accuracy, 32.72% of all infections observed in mobile and Wi-Fi networks were based in IoT. So they went out to 2 decimal places of precision with that. But listen to this. That number was 16.17%, 2 decimal place precision, in 2019. So it doubled. Which it doesn't really surprise me at all. I actually am surprised it's not even higher than that because IoT is so problematic and so forth. Other key findings in that report, which I did attach to the wiki, were that Android devices are the most common malware targets. Okay, another revelation, but it's good to see. I'm not making fun of them for you got to do the research. You can't just say, I think that, so it must be true. So we actually did the research. Somebody put it down, and now you can cite it. But Android, the most common target. Wintel machines are responsible for 38.92% of all infections and malware. Again, so it's kind of like a lot of stuff that I probably could have guessed, but, why not? And malware, defined by them as Trojans, increased to around 74% of malware that they encountered, and that was mostly due to phishing and COVID-19. Wow. That doesn't totally shock me, but that one's a little more of a revelation, I think, than some of those other ones. It's probably about time to start dealing with the fact that IoT's here, and it's not going anywhere except to move into your enterprise, whether you like it or not. So it's going to be there. I don't care. So you might as well just get used to it because somebody's going to bring a sex toy to work. I assure you that's going to happen or something. Louisiana called out the National Guard to deal with Emotet and a rat called Kim Jong Rat. So, best name ever. I'm going to go buy the domain kimjongrat.com just because somebody probably already owns it or it's a porn site. But, that is my favorite name of the year. I thought this was interesting because my first reaction was come on, really? The National Guard? But then I thought about it and I was like, all the resources that the National Guard has in Rhode Island, and it started to sound a lot less like Southern Comfort. Note, that's a really old Powers Booth movie about the National Guard in Louisiana. Think Deliverance with Powers Booth instead of Burt Reynolds. Yeah, so it's a really old movie. But it did start to sound like a better idea when I started thinking about that. And in fact, if you read the story, it's actually not a bad idea at all. So as a lot of us know, all these local organizations don't get along. So state, federal, local, all those people have problems cooperating and exchanging information and so forth. And all these local operations in Louisiana were getting hit back in 2019. And that creates a problem. So the federal, state, and local people all wanted to cooperate, but there's issues about jurisdictions and money and who gets to do what with whom and who can tell what to whomever and so on. So the idea was then that if they declared a state of emergency, they could actually activate the National Guard and have all the Guard cyber people, as the state police and the state tech office, all work together to help. Imagine that. And I was actually thinking about that a lot. And I mean, remember, a state of emergency is not like the purge. A big snowstorm in Rhode Island is a state of emergency. And I don't know what you get in Louisiana. Probably not snow, maybe floods, rains of toads. I don't know what happens in Louisiana. All I know about Louisiana, I learned from the movie Southern Comfort. So not very much. But if you go out in the swamps and you meet like weird hillbillies, they're probably dangerous. So leave them alone. Which is like a life rule. Meet weird hillbillies, leave them alone. I mean, it's just if you don't learn nothing else from horror movies, that should be it. But I thought it was a good idea. I worked on plans like this back in Rhode Island, like back in the early part of this millennium. And it was really a helpful idea that if we could use all these different resources when there was a jam. Actually, good idea, Louisiana. In the continuing saga of the United States versus Russia, I don't think we could call it a Cold War anymore. A digital war, a backdoor war. I don't know. That doesn't sound very good. I don't know. Maybe I don't know what to call it. But anyway, the Treasury Department now, and in the United States, if you're not familiar with this, all sorts of different people have all sorts of different laminated badges, and they can arrest you or bring charges against you. But the Treasury Department, under the unfortunately named, you're going to love this name, Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. I'm like, they need to have a Department of naming things something you can remember, because that ain't it. But they brought, wait for it, sanctions. I mean, what else would they do? It's the Sanctions Act Department. And so the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act against, this is even better, they brought the sanctions against the State Research Center of the Russian Federation, FGUP Central Scientific Research Institute of Chemistry and Mechanics. I'm like, they must charge by the word or something. But I mean, that's a name, right? Wait till you print that on the top of a building. You're gonna have to get like a bigger building to print that on. And then imagine the size of the document that they generated with these sanctions when they had to print that like 100 times in the document and say it over and over again and then read it in court and all that stuff. Anyway, the Chemistry and Mechanics Group, that's what I'm going to call them, is being sanctioned for targeting a petrochemical facility in the Middle East in August 2017 using Triton malware. And Triton is specifically targeted at ICS systems, and it was used to target safety system relays there. The point I think that I was trying to bring with this story is you're seeing more action from the U.S. government now against foreign nationals, even when those foreign nationals are not attacking U.S. assets directly. I mean, they attack something in the Middle East, and so I'm not sure how all that works, like jurisdiction-wise, but they brought sanctions against this group. I don't really know what the implications are. Winston Privacy manufactures hardware designed to increase your online privacy and security. And it's basically a hardware VPN, as that was basically what I could determine about it. But it says on their site that it does ad blocking, network monitoring, reporting, all kinds of stuff. It looked like a cool device. It claims to block internet surveillance, accelerate browsing, and be basically an automated border protection device, kind of like the firewall, I think. I have one of those. It was about $129, so free ad. But anyway, Bishop Fox Research and another independent unnamed researcher reported 9 vulnerabilities that were rated critical or high. Basically, cross-site request forgery, that was the big one. But they also had SSH services that were available on the device that weren't documented, which I'm like, what? Okay. Well, you'll figure that part out in a minute. The researchers, led by Chris Davis at Bishop Fox, said that the device could be hacked remotely by getting the targeted user to access a malicious web page. So this is this cross-site forgery stuff that we've seen over and over again on other things. If you're on the local network, an unauthenticated API request would basically compromise the device. So it's basically got a lot of problems. The vulnerabilities were reported in July, and they were patched last week. According to Winston Privacy Company, the patches were pushed out. This is my favorite part. Were pushed out automatically in a firmware update, which means that they can access your device, your privacy device, remotely anytime and change the firmware. So I was like, wait, what? You okay, thanks. KashmirBlack, which sounds like something you buy from a guy named Kyle in a Hawaiian shirt behind Denny's in 1983, is actually a botnet, which targets WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and other CMS sites. The botnet uses Dropbox and GitHub to disguise itself. So it uses traffic that looks like Dropbox, GitHub, and Pastebin and other types of things, so that you don't really, when you see it, you just think it's normal. If you've been using a little too much KashmirBlack or Maui Wowie or whatever, you may have missed out on the fact that WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, and all the others have quite a few problems in general. So this botnet just exploits your CMS using some of the known vulnerabilities in all these tools. It's a nice framework-based botnet, so they can adjust it accordingly. And then it uses your CMS for crypto mining is one thing it was doing. It can be used for pretty much whatever they want to embed in the framework. So just like a lot of the ransomware stuff, you're seeing these botnet frameworks evolve so that people can embed whatever tools they want in them. And I'm sure they're going to be selling custom versions of it on the dark web pretty shortly, because they do that with everything. They may already be doing that. But it can also use your CMS then as a launching point for other attacks, either to spread the botnet or to attack other places. Researchers are capturing data using a honeypot, so they set up a fake CMS that looked like it was infected. And they started collecting information about the spread, and they estimated over 230,000 sites had been compromised in the last 11 months by KashmirBlack. Like I said, it's disguising its communications with traffic that looks legit, so that when you look at it, you're thinking, okay. And basically, CMS systems get put up and they get ignored. So you see these things sit out there for a long, long time, and they rarely get patched because people don't want to mess with them because they're running, they're busy, and it's a perfect place to hide a botnet. So if you're running CMS, you may want to start watching out for that. This month alone, there were at least 10 healthcare incidents. And these were like healthcare institutions that were targeted by hackers. So this is the list of what they did. Email attacks, which were exfiltration, another exfiltration, a phishing with exfiltration, phishing exfiltration, I'm just listing them, ransomware and exfiltration, email compromise and exfiltration, an unknown cyber attack, they didn't say what it was, that closed the unit for 3 weeks with unknown malware, I'm guessing ransomware, and then one other unknown malware that forced a return to paper records, and finally an exfiltration. So one, they're coming for you if you're in healthcare, and apparently they're going to get you. So they are definitely after you. They're after you with all kinds of things, and exfiltration seems to be the winner here. Can they get your information? Can they get patient records? Can they get other information from you? They're going to use phishing too. And 3, it's going to work. So, I mean, I just keep beating on that drum and saying, phishing, it's going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work. So not all these were phishing based, but some were credential stuffing, which also works just as well. So pretty much all the time. So look, we need to do better on this. We need to move on down the kill chain and start thinking about defense in depth. Maybe call out the National Guard. I don't know. When we return, Roger Hale from Big ID joins me to talk about big data. Sorry. No, I'm kidding. So stick around.
Do you know where your organization's crown jewel data is, whose data it is, what it contains, and if it's flagged, tagged, and classified accurately? Defense in Depth requires discovery in depth. At Big ID, they help organizations uncover dark data, classify sensitive and regulated data, meet compliance requirements, and take action for data on-prem, in the cloud, and everywhere in between. Learn more about how Discovery In-Depth can change the way enterprise organizations find, classify, and protect sensitive data at securityweekly.com/BigID.
Hello. So Roger Hale is going to join us now. He's the Chief Security Officer from Big IDs, speaking of some of these very things we're just talking about. And we're topics from big data. Oh, I hit the mute button. Yeah, they put a mute button down here, so I moved my chair and I stepped on it. So, it's like exactly, and people are getting frantic in my headset. But I kind of like that. It's like frantic. So all I got to do is push this button, and everybody gets frantic. So it's kind of amusing. It's like yelling into the microphone, so they have to pull the sliders back. You get some laughs of that. Hi, Roger.
Hey, I thought this was just my introduction, that you were not going to tell me what the topics we were going to talk about. So I thought that was the mute button was for, was just to see if you could catch me off guard.
Yeah, I'm going to filter it so you can't hear you. He's in the soundproof booth, and we're not going to let him know what we're going to say. So, yeah, this one, you're going to like this. Have you now or have you ever been affiliated with Microsoft? No, I'm not going to say that. But, so hi.
How are you? This is a great day today.
I know. I'm glad you're here. I think with the stuff you're doing, we talked earlier about some of the stuff Big ID was doing, and it was really exciting to me. I love big data. I mean, I've been excited about that for a long time. But I think one of the things that I did want to talk to you about was about access management. And that story about the hospitals really kind of set me off, because I see that. I keep seeing it, and I know one of the things that Big ID does is they don't do access management per se, like the way that we've always done it, but they deal with privacy and managing data like that. You just tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, I think it was a great example, and it was really funny how you kept talking about different types of attacks that fall back into ransomware and exfiltration.
Yep.
And when you talk about access management from the historical standpoint, you're talking about who has access to what data and do they deserve access. And that's one way to look at it. But that falls into that same category of, do you know how many laptops, how many servers you have within your organization, right? and IT can tell you that, and CIOs can tell you that.
I don't even know how many laptops are in my house. I literally, we were talking yesterday about how many devices are in our house. I didn't even know.
Well, on the dark web, it says that I have to pay $7.25 per device. And so your bill is approximately $35.
Oh, thanks.
The reality is that what we really have to worry about is the data, and where the data is, how much data is there. Now we can start deciding, what the risk is to that data, who should have access to it, and why. So the approach is a little bit different of taking that data-centric approach. Big data seems to be the phenomenal buzzword, but we're really talking about having an entity or an identity to the data and understanding who's accessing that identity or who's accessing that data and for what purpose. So this spans the vision of, let's talk about privacy. Wait, no, let's talk about security. Well, have you heard this thing called data governance? Because that's really how you structure and manage information so you can use the information in your business. And Big ID looks at from all those perspectives. And it's not just that's personal information or personally identifiable information. It's really about any data that's critical to your business and understanding where that is. Now let's talk about who should have access to it. What should we do with it at that point, and have that additional discussion, and then automate how we want to protect that information.
Is that because so a long time ago when I was an auditor, I remember very distinctly one of the first things we started trying to audit was the idea of who could access what. So I was working for this company. They had I don't know, 35,000 employees or something worldwide, and nobody knew what to do. So this was in like 2003, right? So this was like way back when they got hit with Sarbanes, and Sarbanes said you need to protect your data. And so I got hired as a consultant, and I was looking at, we were just thinking about it. There weren't any rules, and there were no tools. And the first thing I did was, it was like, well, who has all these Active Directory ACL permissions to say this file, this spreadsheet? And we started looking at that, and the next thing I knew, I had roomfuls of printout, just to try to ascertain who could access, say, this cell. Because the first test we did was who can access this cell. So I made a spreadsheet, and we put it in the network, and I said, this is a financial spreadsheet. We're just pretending. And I said, this cell on this spreadsheet, who can access it? And it was crazy. We spent weeks on that. So, is that gone beyond human comprehension at this point?
It's gone beyond human ability to even do that. And then the way that you were doing it before, how many copies of that have you now created? So how much more risk and how much more data have you created than you really should? And 92% of the data that we have today was actually generated in the last year, 2 years. So this problem is expanding, and so we can take big data as a buzzword, put it to the side, because now we can add those buzzwords of artificial intelligence and machine learning. But that's really the way that we have to handle this is really understanding what machine learning means, and the fact that there's more than one type of machine learning, and not all machine learning works for every type of data out there, from structured to unstructured. But how do we use machine learning to remove the human element, which is slowing down the process of identifying, classifying, and filtering out false positives to bring correlation into what the information really is that you're looking for today. And that's what technology has to do, because we can't do it as an individuals. You don't have a spreadsheet big enough. And even if you use all three of the laptops in your home, you still don't have enough power to crunch that spreadsheet.
Right. And like I said, I was just thinking about that the other day, because like, if you think about what you do at work now, and you've got, beyond 2003, you've got a shared document that is shared with a group. Maybe that group has shares that go to other groups, and then there's both remote and local copies of these things, not to mention cached copies, temp copies. Others, it's crazy. And I don't think that I could comprehend that. I'm sure I couldn't, in fact.
well, not without many cocktails and drinks, and then we'd only figure out one aspect of it.
Then I just say throw a match on it and burn it all down, and we'll go back to using little cards and boxes like we used to do, and maybe that'll help.
It's so amazing today when you look at the different collaborative tools, and you can share something with select people with restricted access. So you can share with your entire company, share outside your company, or you can share with the public directly. And then trying to filter, that's just one collaborative tool of how that information could be shared. How do you monitor that? How do you identify that? And is that data okay? But wait, there's more, because your data is going to change on its risk posture from the initial data that you may have in 3 different systems, especially financial data. Now you're going to aggregate that data as you're getting ready to report your 8K out, because it's the quarterly reporting in your publicly traded company. And that data is highly confidential right up to the point that you publicly announce the data and share it. And now that data, everyone can have it. So how do you address that? And how many people does it take to actually track and manage all that? Or let's actually use technology the right way and understand exactly what that data is and the correlation of that data that creates the risk that it is to your company. And then take action.
And I think the other thing that made me nervous about this was after I talked to you the other day, I sat down, and I always get focused on whatever we're talking about, and so I was thinking about a lot, and I was thinking it was really bad just dealing with Sarbanes. Because Sarbanes was a very vague thing and nobody knew, and we started trying to apply COBIT and so forth. But today, companies, long downstream from there, companies not only have to deal with Sarbanes, they may have to deal with GDPR, they may have to deal with the law in Yemen, because your data may be scattered across the earth, and different groups and different, sovereignties all have access to it, and different rules apply, or they all apply. And I don't really know how you track. So that's what you guys are doing, right? That's you're trying to develop a way for us to manage all that.
Yeah, and all the acronyms, right? And it's really a competition anymore between the different regional regulatory requirements of who's on first. So who's trying to one up who in what areas, and identifying what are those common denominators: CCPA, GDPR, New York DFS. What is that? They actually add in additional mixes into this conversation. How do you manage all those different classifiers, right, that are specific to a specific reporting and auditable region that you have to report out on? However, how do you run your company? So how do you bring that into a common framework of understanding so that you can define common controls that your employees can have any chance of success in following, and your technology components have any chance of being able to politicize on? How are you able to do that then can meet up to all these requirements, especially if you're a global company? Right. That's today's challenge that falls not just into a security or a privacy challenge. It actually becomes a business operational cost challenge. And so the operational efficiencies and the ability to provide this type of visibility in the data so a company can operate and be competitive and make a profit. These are all the challenges that when we talk to our business owners with our customers, and our customers, they're trying to solve this. It isn't, I need to solve a security issue. So what we do is we provide that visibility so that our customers can solve their business problems.
Right. Well, last question, and I'll let you off the hook. But do you think privacy is something that's going to go away? I mean, the future of it. I mean, it's like everything about me has already been compromised. I mean, I get letters probably at least several times a year from from everything from federal agencies. Like my stuff was in the OMB hack. So my top secret clearance stuff was, I don't have that anymore, so I can say I don't have it, but my top secret stuff was in there. So it was theoretically everything there is to know about you is in that file. And I got a letter saying, sorry, we lost it. Somebody took it. So we don't know who it was. It might have been a nation state. It could have been a guy named Chuck. We're not exactly sure. But do you think that, is that the future? Is that privacy just sort of ceases to be a thing?
I pray not, and I don't believe so. I believe that there's a rigor that has to be put to this, and I think some of the regulation out there may be a little bit heavy-handed, but I think it's necessary, and I'll tell you why. Personal experience, I had some of my data that was at one of my healthcare providers that got impacted and was accessed. And the interesting thing is that information was then actually changed. It wasn't just stolen, it was changed. And so when I went to a new healthcare provider, they had the wrong records on me. And the information they had was bad. And that information, if this was an emergency situation, they would have prescribed the wrong medicines that probably would have killed me on an emergency room table. So I think the level of privacy and the level of control of making sure that you can control your own data, because in this scenario, I couldn't just tell and explain and get them to change my data. I literally had to jump through 17 different hoops to have them correct the data that was wrong about my own personal healthcare data. This is my data. And I think that that's the focus of privacy that we should be looking at, not so much of, the bigger, how are you locking this down and how are you not sharing it? Because the concept of data is you have to share it for the world to operate today. But who owns that data, and how can we take care and protect ourselves and have that responsibility of owning our own personality?
And I think that's what I mean by the loss of privacy in a sense. I don't necessarily, because I think that data is going to get known. I mean, there's going to come a time when it's going to be very, very difficult to protect, your whatever piece of information about you don't want other people to know. But it's really more about the fact that somebody can show that it's yours, that it belongs to you. Because, if somebody jumps in there and changes your Social Security records around, you got a big mess. And then you're down there filling out paperwork for weeks on end trying to get it straight. I know somebody had that kind of stuff happen to them as well. And, you get these nice little letters. I remember getting a letter from one of my former employers years ago saying, some hard drives were, dropped and people took them. And we think you should go spend at least a couple of days, getting new bank accounts and getting all new credit cards. And for hourly employees at that university, they said, we're going to give you half a day off work to do this. For faculty, they were like, well, just in your spare time, go ahead. But I mean, even a half day off was like, come on, guys. You really think these people can go to the Social Security Administration, get new Social Security numbers issued to them, and all that change in half a day, plus they got to get new bank accounts? I mean, come on. But I think if we could get to a point, I don't really care if you know my identity number. What I care about is, can you use it for anything? So if it's not useful, then the privacy doesn't matter in that regard. I mean,
well, that's absolutely right, and that's going to take an uplift of technology in so many situations. Even to what you were talking about on the news earlier, the ransomware attack required that this healthcare went back and used paper. Great. What do we do with it now? Right? Yeah. No, my name is Roger Hale. My healthcare records, I'm not 72 years old. I'm not blonde. I don't weigh 130 pounds, and that is not my blood type. We need to make sure that this information is correct, but that has to authenticate, and I have to be the one to be able to control and say, yes, that's me, and this is the authority we have to actually use that data.
I agree. I mean, I think that ends up being sort of the essence of the whole privacy thing. I mean, I understand about your personal life or whatever that. Yeah. I agree with you with that, but I mean, in terms of your data, it's really more about it being yours and not being able to just be used against you all the time. Although if somebody
or in this case, being used actually, in campaigns across the nation, trying to ask for money for me to support campaigns in states and regions outside of where I live.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, thanks, Roger, for being here. If you want to learn more about Big ID, visit securityweekly.com/Big ID, and you will be able to visit that. And finally, just to make sure everyone knows, the Babylon Bee is a satire site. Okay, I just want to get that out there. It's not real. Not real. It's like The Onion, only it's run by conservatives. So, but I don't really know what that means exactly, but it's like conservative satire, which I don't know if that means it's satire for conservatives, or does it make fun of conservative things like Colbert did, or is it like, or I don't know. But a lot of people think it's real. So it gets more traffic than The Onion, and including President Donald Trump, who retweeted a story about Twitter shutting down to protect Joe Biden the other day from the Babylon Bee, and they didn't do that, but he got really worked up about it. And a lot of people, I've seen so many people reposting Babylon Bee articles and saying, "Isn't this an outrage?" And it's like, guys, that's a satire site. It's like when The Onion first came out, and people kept posting stuff, and today everything's so ridiculous anyway. It's very easy to believe The Onion too. You're like, is that real? Maybe. I don't know. No, it's The Onion. Okay, so I guess they made it up. No kidding. Anyway, that's the news for now in the time of plague. I'm Doug White. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Security Weekly News. Thanks to Roger Hale from Big ID. Please don't fall for conspiracies and satire sites. Please.